The male protagonist's agility attribute really makes him perform well in the game, but in the special environment of the swamp he faced a huge challenge. The special effect of the swamp forces the player into a walking state, and this is a huge limitation for the perfect dodge that he has always been proud of. In this dilemma he had to deal with Lon, a boss who released skills in the mud. I thought I could easily avoid it, but the hero's perfect dodge was defeated. In order to protect his fragile body he had to use his newly learned sliding skills. He finally avoided the fatal attack of the mud shark at the critical moment. However, the boss did not give the male protagonist the chance to breathe and took advantage of the situation without mercy. It uses a unique trick to rush directly in front of the male protagonist. In this emergency situation the male protagonist showed no fear at all. He quickly picked up his 2 swords and parried the opponent's attack perfectly. The newly acquired skills displayed by the male protagonist in the battle with Lucaon are indeed impressive. Although his moves were very handsome, he was now in a helpless situation. The battle has only started for 2.5 seconds and both of his evasion skills have already entered a cooling state. If he can't find any other way to defend himself before the cooldown ends, his crispy chicken might really be cut to death by Lon. Seeing that the boss Abyssal Maw is close at hand, the male protagonist begins to feel desperate. Emra, who was watching the joke on the sidelines, finally realized the crisis and took out his magic book. At this moment the male protagonist remembered that he still had a teammate hanging on him. Although relying on an NPC that is stronger than him seems to hurt his self-esteem, but he couldn't let go of this once-in-a-lifetime chance to hit the target. However, the environment in this swamp is very harsh. The male protagonist walked hard for a long time only to find that the mud shark had already woken up. In this dilemma the male protagonist is forced to change his tactics. He used the newly learned spiral blade to engage in a fierce battle with the opponent. As the mud shark was bounced away by the agitated energy, the male protagonist took advantage of the situation and desperately crawled towards the opponent's head with his double knives. After the male protagonist struggled to gain a foothold, he quickly ordered Amura to prepare a trick, and I relied on my many years of gaming experience to delay as much time as possible on the head of the mud shark. The mud shark was teased by a tiny human and became even more violent. However, all this is within the hero's plan. When he finally blocked the mud shark's attack again with repulsive counterattack, Emrys' ultimate move was ready. The mud shark was knocked to the ground by Emrys' Crescent Celestial Clash. Although the male protagonist lost 8 drops of blood due to falling from a high altitude, all this was to prepare for the Jedi counterattack. However, just when the male protagonist was about to hit him again, the huge mud shark disappeared inexplicably. Immediately afterwards the swamp began to shake violently. The soles of the male protagonist's feet seemed to be sucked, unable to move at all. Without any time to think, the male protagonist grabbed Emrys' hand and threw him violently, and he himself was flown into the sky by the mud shark that escaped. Seeing this scene, Amura shouted instinctively. But the male protagonist, who didn't want to fly into the air, was not only unscathed but he didn't even lose much health. But looking at the proud-looking mud shark at his feet, the male protagonist soon realized something was wrong. It turns out that the biggest characteristic of a boss like the mud shark is when its blood volume reaches a certain level, it launches special actions. It will randomly select an enemy and cause them to suffer instant death from falling damage. The mud shark is also known as the lone wolf nemesis. However, even if the male protagonist already knows the intention of the mud shark, but faced with this situation, no matter how good his skills are, he is helpless. Fortunately, Amuro is not a vegetarian either. He finally used teleportation against the male protagonist at a critical moment. He directly transferred the male protagonist to the head of the mud shark. Actually, there is a very interesting setting in Shionkai. That is, the kinetic energy caused by falling from high altitude can be converted into damage. So the moment the male protagonist collided with the mud shark, the system judged his behavior as a sacrificial attack. This is also thanks to the male protagonist's high luck. He not only succeeded in defeating the mud shark by chance, miraculously he even had a little blood left, and its level has been increased by 1 level. After defeating the regional boss, the male protagonist finally set foot on the road to the 3rd town. But before that, he felt that Emra should be hidden first. Otherwise it will definitely trigger the same riots as before. For this problem, Amuro was already prepared. After all, what he is wearing is the secret treasure of Deadly Rabbit. Seeing that the male protagonist still looked confused, Emra immediately decided to perform for him. At this time the male host was dumbfounded. He is obviously playing a masterpiece of passionate adventure. Why did it suddenly turn into this kind of beast girl hee hee haha beautiful girl game? Fortunately, Amura's transformation consumes a lot of energy. In his current state, it is estimated that he can hold on for only 2.5 minutes. So this trump card can only be used when entering the city. However, even though Amura's matter was resolved, the hero was still stopped by soldiers when he entered the city. After all, his half-naked posture and horrific scars are too suspicious. Amuro is not willing to do this. He directly fabricated a pass for the male protagonist that made the speaker sad and the listener in tears. This is to fool the soldiers into spinning around. But just when they were in chaos, the male protagonist suddenly found that the players around him looked at him in a strange way. He thought it was just his illusion, but he didn't expect that the next second a woman suddenly held his hand. It turns out that since the male protagonist's photo was posted on the forum, it instantly attracted the attention of many players. Because there are only pet cats and pet dogs in Shionkai existences, like Deadly Rabbit cannot take back pets at all. So the woman decided to find the male protagonist to inquire about the news. However, some high-end players care more about the tattoos on the male protagonist than Miura's problem. You must know that this is the recognition from Lucaon. This is the first case in the whole game. So many PK players discussed it. Asked the male protagonist how he got it by squatting at the resurrection point. The team that has been chasing Lucaon even directly sent an invitation to the male protagonist to join the team. But at this time the male protagonist does not know that he has become the center of this chaos. He just wants to deal with the woman in front of him now. Looking at the conspicuous level 99 above the opponent's head, he was not afraid at all. Don't look at it, he is still just a novice player who is less than level 30. The fighting skills he honed in countless dungeons are real. You must know that in Zionkai's masterpiece, which is popular all over the world, there are countless stories of people who have surpassed levels of challenge with super high skills. However, the ideal is very full but the reality is very skinny. As the male protagonist had a fierce confrontation with Zimao, his biggest problem became apparent at this time. Levels and equipment of both sides are really far apart. Even if the male protagonist has achieved theoretically perfect dodge and block, under Zimao's strong offensive he could only gradually fall into a disadvantage. So he had to change his strategy, and plan to break into the safe area of the city. However, as a senior player, how could Zimao not think of this? As long as she is alive, it is impossible for the male protagonist to break through her blockade. Looking at Zimao, who had no intention of letting go, the male protagonist couldn't help but recall their previous love-hate entanglement. At that time they first met in a shit game that focused on realism. The original setting of this game was to save a kingdom on the verge of destruction. Players start to work together as a team to fight monsters together. There is no choice because the settings in the game are too real. This directly results in the explosion rate of even a stone being only 40. Even the herb collection task in the novice mission requires players to work hard for 12 hours to complete. Thanks to this extremely bad game mechanism, countless players have begun to find new paths. Who is a serious person who wants to lie on the ground and pull weeds all the time? Wouldn't it be better to just rob NPC's store and get rich overnight? Male protagonist is different, he directly robs the players who have just finished robbing the store. Though in this twisted environment Zimao was born, became the leader of a country by virtue of his superb methods. Not even the final boss in the game can compare to him. Male protagonist met Zimao at this time. That time, after the final decisive battle, the two sides barely fought, and both sides suffered losses. Back to the topic, while the male protagonist is still in a stalemate with Zimao, Miura on the side was the first to have a problem. Must know that his transformation has a time limit. Right now he has reached his limit, and does not give Bai Mao a chance to react. Miura transformed into a cute rabbit directly in front of her eyes. This scene also attracted the attention of the male protagonist. After all, if this continues, the unique plot will no longer be hidden. Though looking at Bai Mao with a crazy look on his face, he suddenly had a good idea in his mind. Zimao was kicked away by the male protagonist. The male protagonist called Emilu and ran towards the city quickly. Seeing that Bai Mao was still reluctant to leave, the male protagonist bluntly said that as long as he could escape safely, asked Bai Mao and Emilu to take a photo together. At the same time, although Zimao was distanced by the male protagonist, he didn't care about it. After all, with his agility, it only takes a moment to catch up with the hero. This moment, a sudden explosion suddenly blocked her way. The person who took action was Bai Mao, who loved rabbits very much. Seeing this scene, the male protagonist instantly realized that his strategy was successful. Now he just needs to run into the city, and everything will be over. At this moment, the male protagonist suddenly made a sudden stop with his big feet. Turns out that Zimao did not come alone this time. Looking at the 4 red-named players in front of me who are obviously unusual, male protagonist then remembered that Zimao also served as the vice president of the Ajura Society. Compared to him, Bai Mao's identity is actually not simple. He is the captain of the animal photography team that has nothing to do with player battles. However, having said that, Bai Mao's combat power cannot be underestimated. Saw her holding her wand high, and lasers of 5 different colors instantly hit Zimao. Though it's a little strange that Zimao doesn't dodge. Looking at the purple light bursting out in front of his eyes, Bai Mao still showed a confident smile. Expectedly, she was dumbfounded the next second. Her magic was absorbed into the equipment by Zimao without any damage. Returned it intact. The end this directly caused Bai Mao to fall into a state of near death. Turns out that all this is the result of the retribution scarecrow in Zimao's hands. This is a rare item specially prepared by her to protect herself from spellcasters, and rebound all the curses she suffered. Though he was unwilling to do so, Bai Mao seemed to be slowly poisoned by his own curse. At the same time, the male protagonist is also in a tough fight. Must know that the 4 opponents he faced were all high-end players who were better than him in every aspect. When he was beaten so hard that he was running away, his savior finally appeared. This time the noise caused by Xiaoling attracted Zimao's attention. Looking at Xiaoling's iconic full coverage armor, she was instantly happy. Didn't he expect to catch such a character after Bai Mao? However, just when she was happily preparing to find trouble with Xiaoling, Bai Mao suddenly spoke. To get the favor of a max level boss in the game. Show your true obsession with the game in the real world. This way there will be a simple girl who wants to get closer to you. Just became the top boss in the game after 2.5 years of practice. Directly saves you in crisis at critical moments. The premise is that you must have the same high gaming talent as the male protagonist. Otherwise you will be dead before the boss arrives at the scene. Facing this sudden reinforcement, the male protagonist was a little confused. It's when he was wondering about the other party's true purpose. Dying Bai Mao next to him brought him a big surprise. Turns out that Bai Mao has a spell that can kill the enemy together. The purple hair of the Scarecrow of Retribution has been lost no matter how quick his reaction is. He could only watch helplessly as he was taken away by Bai Mao's move from the bottom of the box. Seeing that the most dangerous enemy has withdrawn at this time, the male protagonist finally has a chance to escape. Without any time to think, he stepped on Xiaoling's armor and jumped up. After saying sorry, the male protagonist kicked Xiaoling away. He took advantage of this reverse thrust and flew straight into the city. Several famous players at this time really want to stop the male protagonist here. Helplessly, the max level boss behind them is really unreasonable. Obviously, the male protagonist treats her like this, but she is still silently solving the worries for this scumbag. Everyone knows Xiaoling finally recovered after the male protagonist finally ran into the city. Same time, the male protagonist finally came to the Rabbit Kingdom through the portal. Special plot that belongs to him, he finally doesn't have to worry about the enemy chasing him. However, it doesn't wait for the male protagonist to be arrogant for another 2 seconds. Actually received a message from Si Mao at this time. The party invited him to meet him in a previous game. Though he felt that something was fishy, out of curiosity, the male protagonist agreed. Compared to this, the most important thing at this time is to officially experience the rare plot of the Rabbit Country. No, King Rabbit said before that he wanted to train him. In order to respond to the male protagonist's expectations, Emmer took him directly to the arena. The male protagonist needs to fight 10 monsters. He can only use the initial 2 deadly kitchen knives. The male protagonist is of course happy to accept this. After all, he needs to be talented if he wants to use other equipment. Now, he just wants to level up like crazy here. Gave the arrogant Si Mao a lesson after leaving seclusion. Where the ideal is very full but the reality is very skinny. Male protagonist saw the first monster that appeared, he was immediately stunned. Turns out that this monster, called the Majority Hound, has a setting that ensures that more than 5 of them will appear at the same time. Average level of each one has reached a terrifying level 65. This way the male protagonist's first time ended hastily. Fortunately, this is just a game. As long as the male protagonist's spirit is not broken, he can continue to challenge forever without limit. The previous 6 challenges, the male protagonist finally figured out the attack methods of these hounds. The troublesome thing about this group of guys is not the quantity or level. Completely coordinated attack. Male protagonist knows that there must be a commander among the hounds who is responsible for giving orders. After he once again successfully used his skills to avoid the sneak attacks of the dogs, finally found the hound that stayed in a safe place and was only responsible for barking. Remaining hounds were wiped out by the male protagonist. He finally completed the first round of challenges. He just hopes that the second monster will not be more powerful. For what the male protagonist never expected was, the monster that Ember mentioned was a strange bear with 8 snake heads. It made him so angry that he cursed his mother. For with the previous experience, the male protagonist's next challenge will be much smoother. Most of these monsters can be easily dealt with as long as they understand their attack methods. 5th round, the flying poisonous eagle tortured the male protagonist 112 times. Directly hits others stupidly. The male protagonist defeated the 9th round golem. Finally had only the last monster left in this challenge. Thanks to the collar given to him by King Rabbit, the male protagonist tried his best and finally raised his level by 1 level. At the sudden appearance of the Rabbit King, the male protagonist couldn't help complaining, saying that it was just right. This is just an event that will definitely be triggered after he defeats the 9th monster. Turns out that what King Rabbit brought this time was a rare magical beast that he caught with his own hands. This is the male protagonist's 10th round of challenge. Immediately after King Rabbit snapped his fingers, the 10th monster finally revealed his true form. To King Rabbit, this monster is a fool who merged with a tree a long time ago in order to survive. The male protagonist will definitely not be able to defeat him. This round of challenge will be passed as long as the male protagonist can survive for 5 minutes. At the monster called the arrogant tree demon in front of him, the male protagonist felt as if he had been underestimated. The moment the challenge began, he was instantly plunged into a life and death crisis. Fortunately, the male protagonist's extraordinary reaction ability is vegetarian. The several spears controlled by the tree demon are as flexible as tentacles. Successfully dodged perfectly with his super high agility. Not the hero's character to just be beaten. Further understood the attack method of the tree demon. Seized the right opportunity and came to the tree demon with a super long distance sliding shovel. Stabbed the opponent directly in the stomach with 1 knife. What the male protagonist never expected was, the demon looks like a crispy mage. Actually has a mechanism to be immune to physical damage. In words, the male protagonist, who has now lost his only means of attack, can only avoid running around. No ability to fight back at all. This is only the beginning. Only 4 minutes left. The tree demon's attack method has once again evolved. As he is free, he will release a powerful magic attack. Undoubtedly greatly increases the difficulty of survival for the male protagonist. Time goes by, the tree demon will release more and more types of magic. It also has a setting that increases the attack power. The protagonist feels the magical feast brought to him by the tree demon. To being crushed throughout the whole process, the only thing he can do now is to plead with the other party to be gentle. After being attacked by the tree demon one after another, the male protagonist was so tired that his brain could no longer function. Wants to take a good rest and start over again. There will be no punishment after he dies. The male protagonist suddenly woke up. Didn't he understand why he keeps thinking on the premise of losing? When did he become so cowardly? The first challenge, he didn't feel that he could defeat the food monster in one go. Previous battle with the mud shark, when I was about to give up, I was saved by Emru. In this, the male protagonist found that he had become lazy and undisciplined without even realizing it. The protagonist, who suddenly woke up, finally regained his former self-confidence. And he was no longer confused but relied on his flexible movement to approach the tree demon again. The king was a little puzzled when he saw this scene. Didn't understand what's the point of doing this for a male protagonist who can only attack. Did he know that this time he was short-sighted? The rampage of the tree demon obviously did not frighten the male protagonist, but made him even more excited. The protagonist kicked its staff away. What he never expected was, the tree demon lost its magic. Its combat effectiveness did not decrease at all. The attack was even more ferocious than before. The matter has come to an end and the male protagonist has no time to think too much. He just needs to hold on to the last minute. Didn't want to just when he thought everything was settled. Of trees actually blocked his way at this moment. Moment of distraction, the male protagonist's ankle was directly wrapped in chains. Fortunately, this chain does not have the ability to kill him instantly. It gave him 3 disgusting weak states. Male protagonist is completely reduced to a lamb to be slaughtered. Looking at the anxious look of the tree demon focused on finding the staff, the male protagonist suddenly had an idea. Second, he threw the staff into the air with all his strength. It was just as he thought. The tree roots that were originally rushing toward him made a 360-degree turn in an instant. Quickly helped the tree demon get back his staff. The protagonist laughed out loud when he saw this scene. With the appearance of the tree demon, the male protagonist's challenge was finally a complete success. Compared to this, what cares about most at this time is why the Rabbit King's attack can cause damage to the tree demon. Everyone knows the tree demon's ability to be immune to physical attacks is actually the effect of magic. With staff, he is just a moving tree. But this is a story for later. The male protagonist has passed the challenge. The reward prepared by the Rabbit King comes in handy. Of all, the male protagonist won the title of honorary citizen of the Rabbit Country. The thing is that the Rabbit King took back the collar that limited the experience points on the male protagonist. Healer's cheers next to him. The male host was stunned. Different from what he imagined. The only prop was confiscated from him. Compensation, he got a unique plot called Fatal Rabbit Narrator. The narration directly disgusted the male protagonist. Life must go on. With the recommended level of up to 80 in the mission, he felt that it would be more appropriate to level up first. But time another problem appeared. It's to get to the next town he has to go out. But he looks now he will be chased to death by red-named players. The male protagonist was troubled by this. Emra on the side said that he had a solution. As Emla took the male protagonist to find his younger brother Payenzi. This man from the Rabbit Country, Payenzi, possesses a large number of magical props. The headgear that is just right for the current male protagonist. The way things have come to this, and the male protagonist can only accept his fate. But now he has 3 options for where he wants to go. Colorful mangrove cave leading to Phosphinxia. Crater lake leading to Feber. The one is the iron ruins of the mythical age leading to Shikshinbead. After full consideration, the male protagonist finally set his goal on Shuhai Cave. Just as he was about to set off, Emura spotted a familiar figure. They'd never have thought that he was just showing his eyes in the game. He had the death stare from the top boss because of this. That not long ago I had a fight on top of the opponent's head. He was instantly frightened and ran away wildly in the town. Until this scene was caught by a famous player passing by. He could only speed up his escape. There was no way to continue like this, so the male protagonist had no choice but to make a fake move. He did that. He was running in the direction of the iron ruins. But he secretly ran to Shuhai Cave through a small alley. But what the male protagonist never expected was that he would finally escape from the pursuit of a famous player. A flying figure appeared behind him. The protagonist was dumbfounded at this time. He expected that a top boss who was so good would turn out to be a coquettish little girl. But thought about it, everyone who becomes a high-level player is not a simple thing. The party want to get closer to him, and then extract information about the unique plot. This the male protagonist decisively agreed to the friend invitation. He would see what the armored man in front of him could do. Everyone knows Xialing's heart was so happy that she wanted to explode. You know that when she lost her boyfriend she thought she was out of luck. I expect that her random guess would actually lead to her meeting the male protagonist. Definitely the fate between the two of them. Take advantage of this good atmosphere, Xialing suggested that he lead the male protagonist to upgrade. Undoubtedly Xialing's kindness actually aroused the male protagonist's vigilance. Xialing must have wanted to sell him a favor first, and then take the opportunity to ask for information. So it's the excuse that he didn't like to rely on the level difference to easily conquer the game. He rejected Xialing's invitation. Although disappointed, Xialing quickly said that she made a suggestion that would affect the male protagonist's enjoyment of the game. She's death. And not to reduce the male protagonist's favorability towards her, Xialing also cheered for the male protagonist with a serious look. It was until the male protagonist disappeared that Xialing finally came back to her senses. When the protagonist entered the new map, she finally brought back the familiar bird head. And this deserves to be called the colorful tree sea cave. There are kinds of strange insects and plants inside. Seeing the male protagonist became excited instantly. Just a moment, a butterfly with a big belly passed by from above. He'd to try his hand with this little guy first. Butterfly's honey bag is obtained, but has no use at all other than throwing it away. The protagonist then set his sights on a mantis that could be disguised as a flower. I'm throwing a small knife quickly. He'd performed a small operation on the hemorrhoids on mantis, but then mantis recovered the male protagonist, turned him into material with a spiral blade. At that there was a sudden vibration on the ground. Look direction of the sound, it turned out to be a huge unicorn eating honey from the tree. And the bees in the tree would not sit idly by and ignore his banditry. A battle broke out between the two sides in an instant. However, on the horned fairy is too hard and the bees can't cause any harm to him. They could watch helplessly as the horned fairy spread its wings. It went away with one savage charge. But now that the leaders have been arrested, the bees will naturally scatter in all directions. Only horned fairy is left to enjoy the fruits of victory. But at the moment he suddenly realized that there seemed to be two little guys behind him who were plotting against him. So it chasing the male protagonist without saying a word. See, the male protagonist directly threw the butterfly's honey bag onto the butt of the mantis next to him. As did the one-horned fairy, just hugged the praying mantis and beat him severely. While eating, the male protagonist stabbed his wound hard. The fairy is also tough, and he became a source of material all over the place without even saying a word of curse. See, his backpack was filled with materials. The male protagonist decisively decided to end his journey as a fisherman. And with the clues along the way, he finally arrived at the entrance of the regional boss cave. And what's inside is the infamous Harlequin spider. The protagonist initially just wanted to challenge a gatekeeper boss. But he wanted to witness the moment when the player was smashed into pulp as soon as he came up. And went into the cave. The scene where the two beautiful girls were forced to wake up and roll their eyes was even more chilling. All this is the notorious Harlequin spider. But with many years of game experience of the male protagonist, he believed that he could clear this copy without any injuries. After the male protagonist focuses all his attribute points on agility and luck. The spider silk on the wall poses no threat to him at all. Eve is a huge boulder specially prepared by the boss for players to meet and kill. The protagonist also escaped gracefully as if he were taking a leisurely stroll. However, it's a pain for Miss Rabbit, who is watching the battle below. She followed in the footsteps of the previous player. At the time, the male protagonist gradually closes the distance with the boss. However, increasing number of spider threads in front of him made it difficult for him to move forward. At the end, the male protagonist relied on his script-like movements to finally see the true face of the Harlequin spider. Look, intruder, the male protagonist. The spider pierced him without saying a word. But at the male protagonist's clumsy reaction to make him look like Spider-Man. With the spider silk, he slashed the opponent's calf with one knife. However, it's not enough. The protagonist seized the opportunity and made another unreasonable and continuous thrust. This spider fall down without being able to stand still. The protagonist knows that if he falls from this height there should be considerable fall damage. So Oz still wanted to use spider silk to save his life. The hero cut him off with a knife without saying a word. Now there is completely manipulated by the male protagonist. However, the protagonist also knows that this damage alone cannot defeat the opponent. Just a moment, the falling objects entangled above his head caught his attention. Then the male protagonist showed a lewd smile. After Spider's nightmare comes. Even didn't he dare to look at that cruel scene. The protagonist suddenly felt a little boring after playing on it for a while. So he down without saying a word. Although the way of clearing levels is also fun. But if defeat this kind of thing head on, then he shouldn't even think about defeating Lucaon. Then protagonist directly used his two knives and stabbed the spider directly into the buttocks. Waiting male protagonist to enjoy Emily's adoring gaze for a while longer. He received the news from Si Mao at this moment. At the time in the quagmire on the other side, the male protagonist's good friend Huang Mao also received the same message. As the arc known as the Lone Wolf Nemesis shattered into pieces at his feet. He felt a little disappointed. Soon the invitation of Zimao, the three male protagonists met in the previous game. And Zimao is not verbose. He said to the point that he wanted to invite the two of them to fight against the unique monster Gravekeeper. Hearing this, the male host was dumbfounded. You must that it is one of the 7 worlds and monsters with the same name as Lucaon. How do level 30 minions have any chance of winning? As knows, the Shura guild where Zimao belongs has already tried to attack the Tombkeeper and was easily destroyed. With experience, she knows that defeating the Tombkeeper requires extreme player skills. As a professional player and a third player, the male protagonist is his most ideal teammate. In this, male protagonist has no reason to refuse. So 3 people agreed on a time. The male protagonist informed Amuro about his plan to attack the Tombkeeper and asked him to leave the team for the time being. However, to this request, Amuro's entire rabbit brain was numb at this time. After brain shut down, he finally remembered to tell the Rabbit King the news. The protagonist who saw this scene couldn't help but think of the news Zimao shared with him before. The end cannot be resurrected if it is dead. This is the reason why he needs Amuro to leave the team temporarily. And in support his wishful thinking, his good brother Rabbit King no longer keeps a low profile. He dug out his identity as a god-level forger that he had hidden for many years. He said build a magical weapon for the male protagonist. It turned out not long ago. The rat knew that the male protagonist wanted to challenge the Tombkeeper. The other believed that his behavior was completely seeking death. But I doubt the male protagonist to be a senior gamer. He knows what King Rabbit appreciates most is a man who dares to challenge the strong. So the protagonist first stated that he was just an assistant in the team. The quarter is actually someone else. Then he Tombkeeper's recent sad situation. At this, Tombkeeper is being used as a leveling prop by a red name team. Although Mao is also one of them. But she wanted to defeat the Tombkeeper and had made full preparations for it. Although the protagonist's chances of winning this action are indeed not high. But he had to respond to Zimao's fighting spirit to win, and this is the embodiment of his benevolence. Hearing protagonist's true feelings, the Rabbit King sighed helplessly. He said I named Renai's Tombkeeper was pitiful. He lost life because of a bad lie. Since he has become a walking zombie who cannot kill himself. It might think if the male protagonist can really let him sleep forever. For this, King Rabbit is also willing to help the male protagonist. The male protagonist then followed King Rabbit to a room used for forging weapons. The owner room is Bilako, another daughter of the Rabbit King. Without ado, King Rabbit came up and asked the hero to take out his weapons. Looking at deadly kitchen knives that were already in disrepair, King Rabbit felt his recognition of the male protagonist. So Rabbit immediately ordered Bilako to prepare the kitchen knife for realization. Compare male protagonist, who was still confused at this time. Bilako had a completely incredible expression. He never thought he would be able to see the Rabbit King himself wielding a hammer in his lifetime. Ignoring excited look, King Rabbit asked the hero if he had any precious materials. Mentioned the male protagonist thought about it over and finally took out the carapace of the one-horned fairy. Seeing everything was ready, King Rabbit took off his coat and directly exposed his strong body. Seeing Bilako sighed that the male protagonist was really lucky. You know, Rabbit is not an ordinary blacksmith. Only who have reached the pinnacle of forging skills can call themselves famous craftsmen, and ancient craftsmen who can forge lost weapons from the gods. As a king who is proficient in both. He has the level of a divine craftsman that is unmatched by any blacksmith in the world. As the king took out the red-hot blade, his forging finally began. It turned out the Rabbit King knocks out the magic circle and inhales it into the weapon. This is the legend. He will memory and experience stored in the weapon during the battle. Then he weapon into a more complementary shape. Weapons prefixes will automatically remember the process of challenging the strong. I don't happen to the 2 swords that I fought with Lucaon in the hands of the Rabbit King. As the hammer in King Rabbit's hand continued to fall, he suddenly began to mutter to himself. Just when the protagonist was confused about this, the 2 rabbits asked him to stop talking. I don't know the Rabbit King's song played in this forging. However, in this of the male protagonist, his artifact, the Rabbit Moon Double Sword, was quickly forged. The effect per string is that critical hits will reduce your health when fighting an opponent with a higher level than yourself. However, the power of the next attack will be increased. The effect or string is to restore health under the same conditions. And the crit hit by 2, you can also accumulate the combined energy bar. Seeing the artifact, the male protagonist was extremely excited. However, he couldn't wait to try out the new weapon. This suddenly prompted him that the required ability points were insufficient. Then after calculation, he found that he would not be able to use these artifacts before he reached level 50. Soon, the protagonist shared the information he obtained with his teammates. Through the spoken by the Rabbit King, the 3 people believed that the Tombkeeper should be a monster belonging to the undead. After a moment, Zimao suddenly said that he had something to do. Before suggested that the 2 male protagonists go to the Iron Ruins to form a team and level up. Waiting for to throw out the map and fishing rod needed there. He suddenly discovered that the rabbit decoration behind the male protagonist was a bit poorly disguised. After his left, Ears really couldn't stand it anymore. So while doing activities, Huang Mao finally discovered this little cutie. The next, he excitedly played with Emiru. After a raid, the two men finally arrived at the door of the Iron Ruins. In order to level up as quickly as possible, the two male protagonists decisively came to the Iron Ruins to level up. Since Huang entered the game late, he is only level 25 at the moment. This can't make the male protagonist, who is already level 31, laugh out loud. However, the two sides were arguing about it. A huge block suddenly attacked them. Looking at the drone in front of him, Huang Mao asked the male protagonist not to take action. Although he is not high at this time, he is not afraid of fighting at all. The next, Huang Mao used repulsion to fight back and block the drone's attack, with a crunch right after he beat the opponent to pieces. However, obviously just an appetizer. Faced with enemies, Huang Mao just punched them one by one. His role as a boxing master. Although he equipped weapons, he can crush enemies with a large number of buffs. To put it, he is a lightly armored warrior who invests his points in strength and structure. After Huang warmed up happily, the male protagonist and others headed to the road to the hidden area. According to Mao, there are monsters there that can provide a lot of experience. Soon, in the instructions on the map, they found a bottomless mineral. Seeing that, Huang Mao couldn't help but wonder if this was a trap set by Mao for them. So for reasons, Huang Mao decided to let him explore the way first. Seeing Huang's loyalty, Emra couldn't help but sigh that he is really a gentle and strong woman. Hearing this sentence, the male protagonist was a little confused, but he quickly came to his senses. He told Huang Mao was actually a boy. Who would have thought of this? Soon after Huang Mao's shouts in the cave, the male protagonist jumped down holding Emru in his arms. The next was a beautiful underground lake. According to record, a great lake snake with a lot of experience points can be caught here. Although such a small fishing rod is reliable. But the male protagonist and others decided to give it a try first. Unexpectedly, as soon as he came up, there was a reaction from the male protagonist. Just when excited about it, a dumb salmon instantly ruined his good mood. At this time, Mao on the other side suddenly gained something. Seeing that the target had appeared, the male protagonist took out his new weapon. Although the axe that King Rabbit built for him cannot be used yet, but belongs to the materials of the previous Emperor Bee to create a pair of Emperor Bee swords for the male protagonist. The effect poison to the attack that contaminates the attack site, and as touched by bad poison will continue to accumulate and corrode. So the protagonist only needs to attack the Great Lake Snake crazily. He can create a weakness in it. And it was thanks to the male protagonist's forcible defense. Only Huang on the side has the opportunity to deliver his strongest punch. But the bear snake is a monster with high defense. The attack's men at this time were obviously unable to knock him down immediately. Just when it was about to help, the Great Lake Snake suddenly lashed out with its tail. At the critical moment, Huang Mao stood in front of Emilu in time. This unexpected move made the male protagonist breathe a sigh of relief. Because enemies have no chance of resurrection, their protection is particularly important. This scene relieved the male protagonist but also angered them. After the snake attacks again, Huang Mao showed his strong strength and launched a repulsive counterattack to repel the Great Lake Snake. This key attack not only demonstrated Huang Mao's powerful ability, this also valuable time for the hero and the team to replan their tactics. Then the protagonist and Huang Mao worked together to successfully defeat the Great Lake Snake, and then the system prompt bar popped up, even though the male protagonist has simply moved up a notch. But Huang has been promoted to 4 levels in a row and even learned new skills. This made viewers wondering whether it was the type that could be added to the linking technique. Hearing this, the male protagonist mistakenly thought that Huang Mao had confused the game. But the next made both of them feel confused. It turns out in Shangri-La you can combine naturally acquired skills into combined stunts. This is the knowledge that every novice player knows. The male protagonist realized at this moment that he might have some important content by skipping the novice village. What surprised even more was that the facts about the sub-profession and union mentioned by Huang Mao made him collapse on the spot. Although the match passed, the male protagonist has to focus all his attention on leveling up. When Mao back at night, he was surprised to see that the two of them had reached level 40. This made that the two of them were really desperate. However, these are the point right now. It is now of the full moon that happens once a month. They must complete the prerequisite task of challenging the Tombkeeper today and get to know someone. This mission is critical to the development of their game. So they put energy into this challenge. This video, see you next time.